We'll start in a few minutes. We're waiting for more folks to join, and it is a hybrid meeting, so we're waiting for a number of folks to log in as well. So thank you for your patience.
Oh, sorry.
All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. Thank you for your patience. Like I said, this is a hybrid meeting, so we have a number of folks that are logged on remotely. If you're on remote, you'll also have an opportunity to ask questions. If you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A box on the Teams app, And then the team here monitoring the questions will publish them. When questions do come up, we'll give an opportunity to folks in the room first to come up to the microphone and ask questions. I'll do my best to answer the questions, and if necessary, bring up the appropriate staff member or department head to get a little bit more specific if that's needed. Before every town meeting, town staff typically convenes a town meeting forum where we go through all of the warrant articles. Some are more housekeeping customary that you would see on an annual basis, require less details and presentation. And then there are articles that come up either at an annual town meeting or special town meeting that are new and unique to this meeting. And so what we'll do this evening is go through article by article. Some of them, like I said, we'll breeze through very quickly, but then some will likely involve more explanation, discussion, and question and answer. We will be grouping them in categories. So there'll be a budget section, capital improvement plan section, community preservation act section, citizen petition articles, zoning articles, housing articles, and consent articles. So we'll group them up. We'll go through those slides, and then we'll ask for questions after each group, and that's an opportunity. Please come up to the mic to ask your question. It is being transcribed, and it's closed captioning for people in the room and for people online. And if you speak into the mic, that'll just make that system go a little bit easier. So appreciate all of you being here and look forward to the conversation this evening. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm Alex Morse, the town manager, joined by a number of town staff, and town meeting is less than 2 weeks away on Monday, April 3rd. Article 1 is typically the prior year bills, and so invoices that were received for services rendered in the previous fiscal year are considered prior year bills. This year that totals $6,250. And so again, this is a customary article that we find at the beginning of every annual town meeting. Article 2 is the FY 2024 operating budget. So this budget funds government and government services from July 1 of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. It's made up of 6 divisions, but it is presented as a single motion. And the budget summary at the back of the warrant identifies each departmental budget item. Any town meeting voter may ask questions about an individual budget during town meeting. And then if a voter wished, there could be a motion to divide the question to vote on individual budget items separately. We do have paper copies of the warrant in the back, and so if you do want to follow along, as has been the case the last couple of years, you will have a town meeting booklet that will be available the week before town meeting. And when you arrive at town meeting, we'll have a booklet with supplemental materials. And then during town meeting, we typically refer to what page we're on, just so everybody can easily follow along. This is the budget, operating budget summary. So you'll see the change from the current fiscal year, FY23, to FY24, the upcoming year. You'll see that overall there's a 5.3% increase in the budget across all of the 6 divisions. What's different about the budget, the operating budget this year, is that it does include an operating override to cover the cost to begin the transition to what's called a full-time combination fire and emergency medical services department. As many of you likely know, we've been in conversation with Lower Cape Ambulance Association, the Select Board, our fire department about the future of emergency medical services here in the community. Lower Cape Ambulance had initially made the announcement that they were closing up on June 30th of this year, and the town began to work quickly to take on and internalize and bring on our own emergency medical service personnel. We were able to meet with Lower Cape after that initial announcement, had several meetings now over the last few weeks, and their board of directors has now voted to support a new 3-year contract with the town. Given the time frame and the budget implications of going on our own, we thought this was the ideal outcome. And so 2 things happen if this operating override passes at town meeting. One, we continue the level of service that we're currently provided by Lower Cape Ambulance. Right now, they provide 2 ambulances at all times in the town of Provincetown, 1 in the town of Truro. For Provincetown, that's 1 medic, 2 medics, and 2 EMTs, 2 in each of the 2 ambulances designated specifically to Provincetown, in addition to the rescue squad and summer standby that we fund for 270 days throughout the year as well. And then what this does for the first time in Provincetown's history is bring on full-time firefighters. And so we know that many of our volunteer personnel, a lot of our call guys are aging. And so we want to make sure that when our fire chief retires in the next couple of years, we have begun to build out a full-time fire department in addition to having emergency medical service personnel in the building. And so this is a big step for the town. Our surrounding communities, the town of Truro has already begun to hire full-time firefighters. The town of Wellfleet now has a full-time fire department, and it's important that Provincetown begin this transition as well. And so we're in the final stages of negotiating a contract with Lower Cape Ambulance to continue the emergency medical service, and again, hiring 8 firefighters beginning in July 1. Our goal would be that 4 would be paramedics and 4 would be EMTs. We have been getting quite a bit of applications. I think we're up to over 40 applications for the 8 positions. And so we are trying to set those salaries at a relatively competitive rate compared to surrounding communities, around a starting salary of $80,000 to $85,000 a year, given the cost of living and other expenses, and then just looking at salaries of other first responders in other communities. So that operating override is included in the motion for the budget, and so the exact total is just over $1 million, $1,058,476. And if that does advance at April 3rd town meeting, our total operating budget for FY24 would be $34,824,809. The impact of the operating override, so we'll have this in the booklet, and we'll also have this information available again the night of town meeting. The tax impact, $23 per year per $100,000 of assessed value.
Ask about Article 2?
Go for it.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. So for comparison, in the last few years, and I'm sure I could look it up, prior warrants, have there been overrides or exemptions every year?
For exemptions?
Or no, for overrides, Prop 2.5, where we had to go to a vote that year. Do you remember, was it last year?
Yes. So, last year, so overall for this town meeting on April 3rd, we have 2 override articles before the voters. One is the operating override in the budget to fund the transition to a full-time accommodation department, and 2, you'll see the article related to the pier water line. Last year, we didn't have an operating override. We only had debt exclusion overrides. That was the additional $8.5 million debt exclusion override for the police department funding, and then we had a $1.8 million debt exclusion override for the Cannery Wharf Park.
Great, thanks.
Article 3, also a returning article related to funding the tuition for 9 students to attend the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School in Harwich. This number changes based on the number of students and the cost of attendance. Article 4 are our enterprise funds. This article funds both the water and wastewater enterprise budgets. You'll see there's a slight increase in the water enterprise fund and a decrease in the wastewater enterprise fund due to some long-term debt falling off and having been paid off. Article 5, another recurring article, is the PEG access, public education and government access and cable-related fund acceptance. This isn't a taxpayer expenditure. These are funds appropriated through Comcast bills to fund public access, and town meeting needs to vote to accept those funds to continue supporting Provincetown Community Television. Article 6 is a transfer from what's called the Emergency Stabilization Fund into the General Stabilization Fund. So most cities and towns have a General Stabilization Fund, also known as a Rainy Day Fund. A couple of years ago, with the onset of COVID, the state allowed cities and towns to set up emergency stabilization funds that allowed the select board, not town meeting, to authorize expenditures from the Emergency Stabilization Fund. Typically, you need 2/3 vote of a town meeting body to spend any money from a stabilization fund, and this allowed the select board to do that instead during the COVID emergency. That emergency has now been lifted, and so we're asking to transfer the money that was in the emergency stabilization back into the general stabilization, which would then require a 2/3 vote of town meeting. I would also add that the select board has a policy or a goal of having 10% of our annual operating budget in the stabilization fund. And then related is Article 7, which the town has tried to do in recent years, is every year add to the stabilization fund. And so this article, Article 7, would transfer $100,000 from free cash into the general stabilization fund. And if that's approved, we'll have just over $3 million in the stabilization fund, which represents just over 9% of the FY24 operating budget. Again, getting closer to our goal of having an amount equal to 10% of the operating budget in the event the town faces tough fiscal times in the future. So those are the budget monetary related articles from the operating budget to stabilization fund. I know we've had one question. If there's other questions on the budget or any of those articles, feel free to come up to the mic. And unless there's questions online related to the budget. Okay. And throughout the town meeting booklet, we will include the amount of free cash throughout the meeting. And so free cash was certified by the state a little over a month ago. We were able to certify $5.3 million in free cash, and that's essentially unexpended dollars from the fiscal year before. And so that would be from FY22. Expenses were lower than expected and or expenditures were lower, revenues were higher than expected and expenditures were lower than expected. Great. Article 8 is the community preservation budget for FY24. So the Community Preservation Committee, the CPC, makes a recommendation to the select board and adds this article to the warrant. They go through a pretty comprehensive vetting process of applications for funding. And as required, the town annually sets aside funds from new revenue into the various CPA categories, 10% for open space and recreation, 10% for historic preservation, 60% for affordable housing, and 20% into the non-designated category. So you'll see Part 1 reserves, a little over 100,000 for open space and historic resources, 635,000 to support community housing efforts. You'll see debt service appropriations. And this is just a breakdown of some of those. So Article 8B, community housing, the CPC is recommending $500,000 in CPA funds to go towards the Community Builders Project at 3 Jerome Smith. This is the 65 year-round apartment project that will hopefully begin construction early next year at the old VFW. We'll get into that project a little bit later in the warrant as it relates to the town's commitment to the project. Community housing, so again, the Community Preservation Committee approved $225,000 to go to our Affordable Housing Trust. They approved a $75,000 appropriation to go towards Juniper Hill, an affordable housing project in Wellfleet. You have a question?
I do, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
The $75,000 that's going to Wellfleet, is that something that the deed restriction could be limited to an employee of Provincetown or something like that? Or is there a law that prohibits from, like, we're giving money to Wellfleet, I'm just trying to figure out why we're just making them have it as a rental or year-round rental without having some tie to Provincetown directly in the deed restriction. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't know if that was a law or if that was the way they wanted to do it.
So the developer for the project, they put in requests to various towns for CPA funds. So 2 years ago at town meeting, I think Provincetown CPA put in, was it 20 or 25,000 to a project in Orleans? Right. So they put in a request for 100,000 from Provincetown. Respective towns can mandate that 70% is local preference, and so 70% would be local preference for the respective towns. The other 30% would be open to residents of other towns, so it could essentially impact and assist with Provincetown applicants. I don't think we're allowed to stipulate that it goes specifically to a Provincetown resident. I would add for the the 65 unit project we're working on at 3 Jerome Smith, the old VFW. The Truro Community Preservation Act Committee is allocating $100,000 to go towards our project as a sign of regional cooperation. And I would say that Provincetown is acting in good faith in support of this project, despite the fact that the Wellfleet Committee hasn't yet committed funds to the 3 Jerome Smith project.
Correct. And I guess the philanthropic end of it, it seems off to me, and I'm not at town meeting, so I won't argue it, but I go back to, were there other projects in Provincetown that could have used the 75,000?
Yep. Yeah, I think looking at the region and the Outer Cape in general, there's a severe need for more affordable housing. And so between our 65 units, the Cloverleaf project in Truro, plus this project in Wellfleet, it will put a big dent regionally in terms of the inventory of affordable housing available year round. But this is the point of town meeting to question. The Community Preservation Committee made this recommendation, vetted the application. They did have a public hearing to elicit public feedback on different applications, and there was certainly some feedback on not just this, but the other article. So in the future, if there's questions or concerns about how the CPA committee, the CPC, is allocating or recommending funds, there is a pretty extensive public process in that.
If by some stroke of whatever town meeting decides they don't want to spend $75,000 to give to Wellfleet, what happens to that money?
So the money would stay in the account, and I imagine would go back into the balance and then be reallocated in the future at a future town meeting. Yep. There's an open space aspect of CPAs, open space recreation. They're recommending $100,000 for the resurfacing of the Chelsea Ernest Memorial Playground. That's in the West End. It was established in 1954, and the goal is to make the playground safe and 100% ADA accessible through the replacement of the sand with rubber pour and play surface like the Mildred Greenfelder Playground. There's a historic request and recommendation, just over $73,000 for Pam's historic roof at 460 Commercial Street. And there's another historic recommendation for just under $74,000 for the Hindu plank, the deck rebuild. I know I went through the CPA recommendations quite quickly. There's more information and explanations in the book. And no questions yet on CPA articles from those folks online. All right, so next up is Article 9. A lot's included in the capital improvement program. And so this includes the FY24 capital improvement article request based on department heads and town staff's capital improvement plan submittals. And so every year we ask departments for their 5-year plan. So this is FY24 through FY28. And what's brought to the town meeting body is the plan for FY24 that begins this coming July 1st. Articles are listed individually, but will be voted on at town meeting in groups depending on the funding source. And so typically for all of our CIP requests, we start first with the capital improvement stabilization fund. We then go to free cash, enterprise fund retained earnings, or borrowing. And so when we're looking at the total approved in the FY24 CIP, we want to make sure that we have enough funds and how we're allocating the different categories of funds. Any town meeting voter may ask questions about individual items within the capital improvement plan, and a motion to divide the question would be required to vote on any individual item separately. To give you a sense, we're starting town meeting with a starting balance in the capital stabilization account with just under $1 million with $978,000. And these are the projects that will be, motion includes the funding source from the CIP stabilization. I won't go through every single project. You'll see in here a project at the airport, money to support the coastal resilience and climate action plan, site readiness for the current site of the police station, 26 Shank Painter, and site readiness at 288 Bradford Street. I know this is hard to see, and we'll get a little bit more specific in the next slide. But as I mentioned, we're starting town meeting with a free cash balance of just under 5.3. And then 9G through 9Z are all of the capital improvement plan projects that will be funded through free cash. And so any project funded through free cash has no impact on tax bills. These are not overrides. This is money that's available to the town to spend on projects again, that aren't asking town voters to chip in more money to make them happen.
Hello.
Alex?
Yep, Alex Brown. Listen, on 9D, why are we re-spending money again? That was studied back in 2017 by the Army Corps of Engineers. They paid for it. They brought it forward to us. We voted the thing down. I definitely spoke against it. And I don't understand why we're throwing money, or we're throwing money away again, 120,000, because listed on the back of that thing, the following year, you're asking 500,000 and another 500,000 the year after for that thing. I had already spoken last night at the Concom meeting. I spoke at the Board of Selectmen's meeting Monday night. I'm here speaking on behalf of me, not from the Shellfish Committee that I'm on. We didn't even know about this Long Point Dike thing. We didn't even know that this was coming back up again. And again, I feel like we're around again, given that the last minute we did vote against it. But the thing is, this is wrong. I had my 4 points, my 4 bullet points. You gotta get that out in 3 minutes. How do I take my life that I've been out there for 34 years with the oldest shellfish grant here in Provincetown that's been successful, and I have 3 minutes to defend it? To go to town meeting to do that, the second I get up there, somebody says, move the question, and that's it. I just don't understand. I don't understand this thing. If you people want to hear the 4 bullet points I have, if you want to hear it, I'll give it to you. But it's just kind of sad that I'm just going to see what's left of my fishing career go down the tubes in the next couple of years. And no matter what any biologist says on this doggone thing, they've yet to prove what's going on out there. How much modeling and scientific study have been done to that place? And the West End Marsh compared to the Herring River restoration thing up in Wellfleet. Here goes Wellfleet. All right, they studied that Herring River thing for 10 years and they still don't have it right. And now they're going, oops. Has there been an ecosystem-wide survey done of the West End Marsh so we really know what's going on out there? No. Once the water starts to flow, how will the channel deepening and scour be controlled with the sediment that's going to bury the shellfish grants and the recreational area on both sides? Nobody's talking about that. What's going to end up happening is Long Point is going to become an island. And that breakthrough on the other thing too, there's going to be a breakthrough out at Herring Cove, Wood End, out in that area, which we had in 2018 in that big storm. If it wasn't for that dike that was there, we would have had a real big problem over there. It's going to be like a channel, like an intercoastal waterway that's going to go through that doggone place. And the final thing here is the money that's going to come in there. You're going to have to raise that road up. As everybody knows, whenever we have the water that really floods in there, down by the moors over there, that thing floods. You're going to have to come back for money to raise the road because now we own the road. So this thing is just going to be a never-ending thing over and over again. But, you know, I'm just concerned with my livelihood, you know. And I don't know. I'm absolutely speechless that nobody came to us and asked us about it. So, thanks for listening to me.
No, appreciate it, Alex, and
all right, thank you.
Appreciate your comments and concerns. And I just want to make sure folks in the room and folks online, and we'll also make sure that we mention what this does do and what it doesn't do at town meeting. And so this CIP article doesn't fund any work happening there that would be pending a town meeting vote in the future. What the CIP does do, it only includes the town share of the cost to finish the U.S. Army Corps' feasibility study on potential modifications to the Long Point Dike, the West End Breakwater, and it does not authorize the construction of any modifications. The potential modifications include creating 1 or more openings that would enable fish to enter the marsh to prey on the purple crab, providing a check on their explosive population growth. Such openings would also allow sand into the marsh to help elevate the marsh so that it can thrive against rising sea level. And so essentially this is a feasibility, not just on opening up the breakwater, but could also include looking at alternative methods to control the purple crab population that would not include modifying the breakwater. And so we do think it's important, regardless of what you think about the potential work there, to at least complete the feasibility as to what we could do to control the purple crab population. We do want to work with the Shellfish Committee and the shellfish population here in the community to make sure that we strike a balance. But authorizing this project doesn't authorize any construction or outcome. We just want to make sure that we know what our options are. Dennis?
Yes, thank you. You've pretty much made all the points that I was going to make. I don't have the expertise of the previous speaker, but it is my understanding, and you confirmed it, that this study that we're contributing to may answer some of the questions that were just raised. And so I'm satisfied with that.
Yeah, appreciate that. And the last thing the town wants to do is negatively impact people's livelihood and ability to support themselves and their families. And we realize that shell fishing is a big aspect of our economy, both economically and recreationally. So the last thing we want to do is do something that would harm that. But again, as Dennis said, and I said before, this is for feasibility, and we'll look at a number of different options, and I think provide facts for all of us to be on the same page and then make a decision from there. Going down, just a brief summary of other projects on the CIP. There's some recurring ones for fleet replacements in various departments, build and capital maintenance plan, stormwater improvements. One I wanted to separate out, Article 9AA, is potential pickleball courts at Jerome Smith. This article will be funded from a transfer from unexpended funds from previously approved town meeting articles and free cash. This would potentially fund up to 4 courts at the far corner of the Jerome Smith parking lot on Route 6. And so if you know where the new police station is being constructed, there's a parking lot that abuts that. You typically see tour buses there. This would eliminate a small number of tour bus spaces. It would construct up to 4 pickleball courts. If this was to move forward, we would make a recommendation to the Rec Commission that the court on Nickerson return just to basketball. The pickleball courts at Nickerson are directly next to abutters properties. The closest abutter for these courts is over 200 feet in compliance and further away from a residential neighborhood.
Wondering if you consulted at all with the police chief about their location, how he felt, if he had any input regarding his office being right next to it. And also the developer of the property across the street that's going to house, I believe, over 100 people. I mean, none of them have votes now because they're not built and they're not here, but has anyone given thought to how they're going to feel? Because they're going to be the future Nickerson residents that are going to be coming to your meetings complaining about the noise for the pickleball courts.
Yeah, so all of the potential housing units at 3 Jerome Smith are beyond the 200-foot buffer. We're all a team on town staff, and so police chief has been consulted, as has other town staff. Ben, you'll see in the graphic there, that's the far right where we're proposing the pickleball courts would go, and then you could see some of the darker vehicles more close to the or closer to the police station. Those are the police department specific spots, and so the spots where these courts would go aren't police department spots; they're tour bus spots where we get a nominal amount of revenue for the town.
They're going to be lit.
The courts themselves won't be lit. The only lighting that will be included are typical lights that would be on any town-owned parking lot. But they're not going to be lit specifically for late night play. Article 9B is the pier water line replacement. This is the only debt exclusion article before town meeting voters on April 3rd. This is for additional funds required to replace the water line that serves McMillan Pier and its tenants. The current issues and potential water line freezes over the winter months and could continue and cause more damage, resulting in more costs. The total project cost is over $2 million. The pier has already applied for and received a MassWorks grant of $395,000 to lower the cost, and the ask to town meeting voters at this point is $1.7 million. The pier and the town do plan to pursue future grants, again, to further offset that amount. If this was to be approved by town meeting voters, you'd see the tax impact. And so it's $2.74 per year for $100,000 of assessed value. And at the median property, that would be a $21 per year expense for the average homeowner in Provincetown to approve this $1.7 million project to advance the pier water line at the pier. So again, this is the only debt exclusion article on the warrant.
Yeah, I got it. Is that for fire or is that for water for people on the pier for water usage?
It's for both, really. So supply water to the tenants at the pier, and also I think to add capacity and support needs at the fire department.
So what is that, a 4-inch main or a 6-inch main? Or?
Jim, do you know? Jamie, you want to come up to the mic? Just so folks online could also hear you. And Jamie, can you identify yourself too?
Yeah, Jamie Stanisha, Provincetown Public Pier Corp. So the working plan right now is for a 2-inch main that will supply water during the winter. Will be insulated, a second 3-inch main that supplies water to the larger users during the summer, and a dry 4-inch pipe for fire prevention.
Thank you, Jamie. Any other questions on CIP articles? I know in the warrant, there's a whole list of projects, but I know I highlighted a few, but if there's questions on specific items, please let us know. And if there are questions that come up between now and town meeting, you're welcome to reach out. And obviously the night of town meeting, you're able to ask questions on specific articles and projects as well. Feel quiet online? Great. Article 10 is mostly housekeeping. This is rescinding a borrowing authority. Town meeting in the past approved an article in 2012. Bond counsel, the town's financial advisors, ruled that it wasn't eligible for borrowing, and so we just need to essentially rescind the borrowing authority at a town meeting. Article 11, this is a funding article. This is not a override by any means, and so as part of the Jerome Smith housing project, again, the former VFW, that will be home to 65 units of year-round rental housing, much needed in Provincetown. The town administration, the select board made a $3 million commitment to the project. And so as part of this $3 million commitment, we're going to town meeting on April 3rd to appropriate those funds. The town's share, the $3 million commitment, has put us in a good position to get funded in the first round. It's typically very rare for cities and towns to get projects funded in the first round of state funding. That application was submitted in January. We hope to hear as early as June. And then if we are funded, the project will begin in early 2024, again, to construct 65 units of year-round housing. It's already been permitted by the town. And this article asks for $1.65 million transfer from excess money in the tourism fund and $600,000 from free cash. And just for context, the tourism fund, you may know we have a formula that allocates our rooms tax receipts, and a percentage of that goes into the tourism fund. After looking at what the tourism operates on their annual budget, we're able to identify how much money is in the tourism fund that's above and beyond what they need to support their budget and what they need to support their grants. And so there is a significant amount of surplus money in the tourism fund that we want to transfer out to put towards the $3 million commitment, and this prevents the town from going back to the taxpayers to make up this commitment and then adding that $600,000 from free cash. That adds up 2.25. The other $750,000 to get us to $3 million has already been approved and appropriated by the Affordable Housing Council, or the Community Housing Council from the Affordable Housing Trust. And so this completes the town's $3 million commitment. It comes out to about a $60,000 a unit subsidy for the town, which when compared to other town subsidies for a unit, this is significantly more affordable for the town given the density of the project. And I would just add Article 11 begins a series of housing articles related to our housing efforts in Provincetown. Article 12, firehouse number 2. This is the firehouse towards the west end, next to Bubala's, where the public restrooms are. Right now, we store documents and other things upstairs there. So it's, I think, not the best use of space when we are in need of more housing units. And so this would convert the second floor of the former firehouse number 2 into housing. We're hoping to achieve upwards of 1 to 2 year-round housing units. The exact use is still unknown, whether we'll use this both for seasonal housing and or year-round housing, but we do think it's important that we make the investment in making a town-owned space that is storing documents into available housing.
Thank you. The renovation, is there any additional build out? Is there any foundation work, or are we just converting basically an attic into living space?
There's no foundation work. In order to maximize the space, the construction will likely include the addition of dormers to add additional bedrooms and additional space. Article 13, also coming from free cash, funds a consultant to create a community planning process for Shank Painter Road. As many of you may know, there's a long-awaited reconstruction of Shank Painter that will include better pedestrian access. Slated, I think, in 2025 to begin construction. The planning board has embarked on a planning process for Shank Painter. It's the general commercial district. Last year at town meeting, voters approved a zone change to allow upwards of 4 stories for certain community affordable housing projects. And so the planning board wants to hire a consultant to look at the possibility of incentivizing commercial activity on first floors with residential upstairs. And so they would report back to the planning board, the select board, and town meeting as to are there particular bylaws, zone tweaking, policy changes that the town would need to do to encourage that type of development along the Shank Painter Road corridor. Article 14 is, again, funding from free cash that would fund a pilot program to address some of our workers' transportation challenges. We've heard directly from the business community that there's a gap in transportation service, both because Provincetown has typically a longer shoulder season. We start earlier and go later than most other Outer Cape and Cape Cod communities, and sometimes our public transit doesn't specifically respond to that need, although we are in conversation with CCRTA, but we do think it's important to allocate these funds in the event we need to provide supplemental funding. We are working with the school department. We have been given access to a 12-passenger bus to hire someone to do late night and early morning transportation, and this is for workers that work in Provincetown but may live in Truro, Wellfleet, Eastham. And we've gotten feedback, like I said, from businesses and employees that are, getting paid $15 or $20 an hour and then having to pay almost an hour or two's worth of work to take a cab or an Uber or Lyft or whatnot. And so our hope with this is to prevent our workers from having to do that. And given that housing is expensive and sometimes unavailable here, it's important that we provide that transportation service.
About that.
Yeah.
So I did get some questions from people I mentioned this to, and of course everyone is very happy about it. But someone I talked to who works at a bar was curious whether this will be restricted to, or is the hope that it would be restricted to businesses? I know it's in the planning stages, but, or could people hop on after going out drinking?
Yeah, so it's not a, the town isn't starting a service to provide transportation for people that, although we do support safe driving and obviously don't want anyone driving intoxicated. I think our primary focus right now is a pilot program to address workers. And our hope would be is that we get the business community to chip in to help fund personnel costs related to drivers, gasoline, things like that. If we get, and we're calling it a pilot too, because if enough businesses aren't getting passes for their employees, then maybe it won't become a viable, because we're hearing this from the business community, but what we want to be able to assess is, are there actually workers at those shifts and at those times that are going to utilize this service? we're hopeful that CCRTA, the Regional Transit Authority, could meet the need and also do a pilot program, which would allow the town to support that and help market that. But we do want to make sure we have the option available, given that it's become more of an issue the last couple of years. Article 15 is a home rule petition. That's when town meeting passes an article that would require the state legislature, the House, Senate, and the governor to sign a bill allowing us to pursue a certain policy. So this article would create a petition to allow the town of Provincetown to create a year-round deed restriction program to promote year-round housing occupancy. This would potentially be managed by the year-round market rate rental housing trust with approval from the select board. The program would allow the town to purchase deed restrictions from homeowners and developers to permanently limit the occupancy of a given unit via a year-round housing occupancy for rental or ownership housing. It's important to note this is just a voluntary program where homeowners could sell a deed restriction to the town for a yet to be determined amount. This home rule petition would, number one, make it possible for the town to actually oversee a program like this. At one of our most recent housing workshops, the select board invited in the housing director of Vail, Colorado, who presented their Vail and Deed program. Again, it's a voluntary program that is both in the short and long term meant to increase the supply of year-round units and year-round housing. This isn't a funding article. Again, it's a home rule petition that would allow the legal parameters for the town to actually do such a program.
Would that program trigger compliance to current codes? So, in other words, if you wanted to enter into that program, would you have to have your place inspected and upgraded to current codes? Because that could be a main detracting element to it, since older places that might do that might not have smoke detectors that are wired all together, or alternate egress, or whatever else current codes require. That would then mean that some of the money that you're giving them would have to go to upgrading the facility, the unit. So it would be kind of a deterrent to that. I would hope it wouldn't. So
yeah, so it's both a short-term and a long-term program. I think there'd be some low-hanging fruit where there would be some units available to use now. I think for folks that are aging that may not, have a lot of cash per se, but equity in the house and won't be there too much longer. I think for the town, it's more important to have inventory, and so I think it would be less important that it meets current code, but in the future, it's deed restricted to year-round housing. And so the inventory is more important than the initial upgrades of codes. It's making sure that we're growing the number of deed restricted homes, and it could be helpful for people on fixed incomes, people in retirement, really to preserve supply. And so it would offer an incentive to a homeowner rather than, selling your home for the highest possible price.
well, the only reason I say that is that the accessory dwelling unit program triggers an inspection, and that would trigger complying to current codes. So if you have an accessory dwelling unit that you say, yeah, sure, I can do that, and then it triggers, an inspection, and then they say, okay, but you have to do such and such and such and such, then you're not getting anything from it. Yep. You're sort of opening a can of worms by entering into it.
Yeah, I'll follow up and get more information, what they're doing in other communities with these programs. And you make a good point on the ADU program. I think overall we have to examine ADU incentives and permitting here. We haven't seen the number of ADUs be constructed or permitted that I think this town hoped for when it first introduced that bylaw a few years ago. Article 16, another housing related article. This would expand the residential tax exemption for year-round rentals. Article would allow for a domicile-based residential exemption in addition to having multiple expanded residential exemptions on a multi-unit parcel. So right now, you're only allowed one residential tax exemption per parcel. And so this would amend Chapter 25 of the Acts of 2018 to allow more options for non-resident owners of multi-unit properties to financially benefit from the ability to rent multiple units to year-round Provincetown residents. Additionally, permanent residents who own multi-unit properties will have a new incentive for renting to Provincetown residents by also receiving exemptions on their rental units. So for example, if you're on a parcel, you get the residential tax exemption for living here year-round. You have another unit on your property and you're renting to someone year-round, you're not eligible to get a tax incentive both for living here year-round and for renting to someone either affordable or year-round. And this would allow folks to get a higher residential tax exemption or get multiple exemptions on values of the property. Jonathan?
Maybe I missed it. You're saying that if you live here year-round, there's a tax exemption as a resident living here year-round?
Yeah, so if you live here year-round, you can get a 25% exemption, 25% exemption on your value on your primary residence.
Oh, okay.
Just by
Because again, I have one that I would do with an ACL or accessory dwelling unit, but for the fact that I would have to comply to current codes, which would make it unrealistic for me to do it. So.
But you know about the 25%
No, I didn't know about that.
exemption for your primary residence where you live?
No.
So any resident that owns property here, lives here year-round, after living here for a year year-round, you have to provide the front page of your Massachusetts tax return with the address, go to the assessor's office, get the 25% tax exemption.
Well, here's the conundrum there. If I have a property that has 4 buildings on it, the 25% would be for the total taxes on that property or just for the building that I live in year-round?
I think just a building you live in, but we could set up a time for you to talk with our assessor and we should get you to apply for, you do live here year-round, so you should be applying for at least some level of the residential tax exemption. And sometimes we hear from, second homeowners that get residential tax exemptions in other communities about purported unfairness in ours, but there are ways for second homeowners to get a residential tax exemption. There's the affordable housing tax exemption. So for anyone that rents year-round to someone under 80% of AMI, they get the tax exemption. And then there's the expanded one, which if you rent year-round to someone regardless of their income, you also get the 25% tax exemption. Again, as part of our efforts to expand year-round living options here.
Does that trigger an inspection? Second one you mentioned, if you rent year-round, trigger an inspection?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. Scott would know. We can follow up. Go ahead, Dennis.
Once you've applied for that, is it permanent or do you have to reapply every year for that tax exemption, residential tax?
I think it's permanent once you receive it, but it changes if you're no longer a primary, this isn't your domicile-based address.
Yeah, but if nothing's changed, it's a permanent exemption.
You mean the year-round residential tax exemption for people that live here year-round?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you have to apply for it on an annual basis.
Thank you.
I think we're going to get some new applications for the tax exemption tomorrow. All right, any questions, any other questions on any of the housing related articles? All right, so now we're entering the citizen petition section of the presentation. So for annual town meeting, which is the first Monday in April, any voter can add a citizen petition to the warrant, and all they need is 10 signatures. Citizen petitions, I want to make clear for people in the room and for people online, are not sponsored by the town, or not necessarily supported by the town administration, or a select board. Again, these are citizen petitions, and so at this point, this year, we're allowing the petitioners for each of the articles to have upwards of 5 minutes to briefly present their petition, and we're going to start with Article 17. So if you would just introduce yourself, and then you'll see the slide here that people can see, and then this right arrow.
Hi, my name is Marjorie Keene.
Speaking of.
Hi, my name is Marjorie Keene, and I am the petitioner for the plastic reduction article. This article will eliminate plastic carry-out containers and plastic cutlery. I think we all know that we have a problem with plastic. Single-use plastic is a local, national, and global issue. A study that was published analyzed 12 million pieces of trash collected from oceans, rivers, shorelines, the seafloor, and open waters. Researchers found that 80% of the items were plastic, and nearly half, 44%, was related to takeout materials. Other items included disposable cutlery. Estimates are that there will be more plastic than fish in the oceans by 2050 if our behavior does not change. Plastic kills multiple seabirds and over 1 million marine animals each year and comprises 80% of beach trash on Cape Cod. The economic cost of plastic pollution affecting tourism, fisheries, and shipping sectors are estimated to be at least $8 billion annually. Single-use plastic problem. Takeaway boxes and containers make up a considerable part of the municipal solid waste, with nearly 30% of the total generation as recently as 2018. Nearly 1/3 of single-use plastic greenhouse gas emissions come from takeaway food containers. The life cycle of single-use plastic adversely impacts human and environmental health, from production to consumption to disposal. Specific to takeout containers, they are made from heat-resistant, flexible plastic derived from petroleum. The majority continue to contain phthalates and bisphenol A. Both have been linked to health issues. At disposal, plastic does not degrade. Plastic affects health and environmental well-being. Plastic is a human and environmental health hazard. Plastic has been found in the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat. Most recently, plastic has been found in human blood, in the placenta, and in lung tissue. Plastic recycling is not a solution. Most single plastic is not recycled. This is a picture of the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, March 2020, 3 years ago. It's a room full of compressed plastic waiting for somewhere to go. We are living in a world increasingly made of plastics. Yet plastic only became popular in the 1960s. 90 years ago, it did not exist. Now I will discuss the proposed bylaws. Except as provided herein, food establishments are prohibited from dispensing prepared food to customers in disposable food service containers and utensils made from plastic. This bylaw shall take effect on September 1st, 2024. I have one more thing to read. I'm out of time. The intention of the plastic reduction article is to create a behavioral change so that our communities relearn how to be less dependent on single-use products. There are reusable solutions. The transition will be impactful both in implementation and outcome. However, we cannot continue to subsidize short-term profits with long-term costs to human and environmental health and well-being. Thank you. I take questions.
How do people eat? Like when they do takeout, in other places where this has been, or are you only?
Martha's Vineyard.
Okay.
Mount Holyoke College. And in Europe, there's a lot less plastic, and I have a list of other countries, but private institutions within the United States have adapted this. And there are companies that provide closed loop containers. So you take out your food in the containers, you drop them at some drop-off point that they provide. It's washed and sent back to the restaurants.
It sounds like the primary, or one of the, well, there's only two, but like the containers seems to be evidently, a large issue. But forks and knives and spoons, I'm sincerely confused whether it's part of your proposal to suggest what will happen, or are you only going to be interested in that it passes?
Right now, we will work with people after this passes to find out solutions. And the food vendors that restaurants are dealing with right now have solutions. And perhaps as more and more people get involved, the costs will go down and down, but the costs will have to be passed on to the consumers.
You said this is a voter submitted, so who are we?
Sustainable practices. Thank you. I am the petitioner. Is that your question?
Yeah, you just said we, so I'm wondering who you're speaking for.
Oh, sustainable practices. Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to make a comment on the last question, talking about like, how do people eat, like what will they use? So as Marjorie mentioned, there are companies that provide closed loop systems where you can return the product after you've used it. There's also, in the time being, like if that isn't implemented yet, there are options made of other materials. I've worked in the service industry for like 6 years. You can order takeout containers that do not contain any plastic, as well as cutlery. And the plastic silverware, it's a big problem because it can't be recycled at all. So that is forever in the environment. Yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Hannah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Marjorie. All right, the next three petition articles are petition articles related to short-term rentals, Articles 18, 19, and 20. And if the petitioner for Article 18 wants to come up, have the floor.
Hello, everyone. I thank you, Alex Morse, and the residents of Provincetown for allowing me to present Article 18 to you this evening. My name is Michael Gaucher, and I'm the lead petitioner on Articles 18 and 19. It is no secret short-term rentals are depleting year-round rental housing stock in Provincetown. A report by Camion, commissioned by Provincetown Select Board in 2019, states, quote, "A rise in short-term vacation rentals continues to constrict the supply of year-round rental housing," unquote. Frontline workers, clinic staff, municipal workers, bartenders, they are forced out of their rental properties because they're being converted to short-term rentals. It should also come as no surprise that corporations are purchasing massive amounts of dwelling units in desirable locations to turn them into short-term investment properties to generate income for their shareholders. Marriott International has a homes and villas division created for this express purpose. A company/investment firm named TechVestor advertises as the, quote, "strategic way to invest in short-term rental properties. We send you a check," rental properties. "Passively invest in short-term rentals with as little as $25,000. We do all the work and we send you a check every quarter. You invest, we do the rest," unquote. Even our own storied history of mom and pop owned guest houses is being supplanted by corporations, with 3 different companies collectively buying up 9 formerly privately owned guest houses to add to their corporate holdings over the past few years. Vacation destinations like Provincetown are especially desirable to companies like TechVestor and Marriott International because demand for vacation rentals is high. Make no mistake, Provincetown real estate is hot, and corporate America wants a piece of the action. It is in this environment and under these distressing circumstances Article 18 is being brought forward. Simply put, Article 18 limits the number of short-term rental certificates one person can hold, specifically 1 certificate per person. Corporations will not be allowed to hold short-term rental certificates. Certificates can only be held by natural persons or LLCs that are attached to natural persons. Individuals who currently have more than 1 STR certificate will be grandfathered in. Many other cities and towns have successfully limited short-term rental certificates to natural persons in the same fashion. An incomplete list includes Boston, Boulder, Great Barrington, and San Diego. Corporations were successfully locked out of ownership without negative impacts to community. I ask Provincetown to follow in kind and vote yes on Article 18. I was told just to keep going on to 19, then 20, and then we're going to take questions, right? Yeah, all right. So, once again, Article 19, it is no secret short-term rentals are depleting the year-round rental housing stock in Provincetown. A report by Camion commissioned by the Provincetown Select Board in 2019 states a rise in short-term vacation rentals continues to constrict the supply of year-round rental housing. Ask anyone. Grocery store, restaurant, post office, clinic, everyone knows someone whose home was turned into a short-term rental. Article 19 is intended to stop these evictions by making short-term rental certificates less easy to obtain. Similar caps and limits have been initiated in Massachusetts towns and cities and towns across the country. It is an additional and complementary tool to be used to decrease the number of year-round rentals to be turned into short-term rentals while the housing at Jerome Smith, the barracks, and other projects are completed. In brief, the article asks the number of STR certificates available through the town to be capped at 1,500. Once the cap is reached, a unit owner who wanted to short-term rent their place would have to wait until a property relinquished their certificate and then enter a town-held STR lottery to be considered. Article 19 is designed to do the least amount of damage to existing STR holders while leveraging maximum benefits. Those who currently hold STR certificates can continue to rent their second homes. I would like to repeat that. Those who currently hold STR certificates can continue to rent their second homes. The proposed cap is the number ascertained by Granicus, combining both the registered and unregistered short-term rentals currently available through online platforms. These articles limit STR certificates in the future while protecting year-round housing of individuals who live here now. STR caps have been initiated across the state, the country, and the world. A partial list includes Savannah, Austin, Charleston, Boston, Nashville, Chicago, New Orleans, New York, San Antonio, San Francisco, Santa Monica, Fairhaven, Brumfield, Boulder, Telluride, Breckenridge, San Diego, Colorado Springs. The list goes on and on. The impetus for the caps in each case was to retain year-round housing stock. And guess what? Not one of these locations that initiated caps, not one, has decided to reverse the course of action and uncap STRs. In fact, a report done for the city of New Orleans states a sizable percentage of communities that initiate caps revisit the number and often decrease the amount, limiting the number of available STR certificates even more. Example would indicate the strategy works. Opponents have a variety of concerns, and I'll run through some of them in hopes of answering some questions. We currently have a study that's being done, and folks are saying, well, shouldn't we wait for the study to be done before we move ahead on housing restrictions? I say the town is already in possession of a study from 2019 quoted above that states short-term rentals are detrimental to year-round rental housing stock. It's confirmed. And although a study may be helpful, the fact is that we don't have a lot of time. People are losing housing every day. And I don't know how many more people we need to leave this town before it becomes economically unviable. STR limitations will negatively affect tourism. This is patently untrue. Keeping the STR cap at the current amount will ensure a robust tourist economy. However, what is true is not initiating an STR cap will negatively affect tourism because there will not be enough workers to serve the tourists who visit town. Numerous restaurants, most notably the Muse, were closed 2 days a week due to worker shortage. Century couldn't get anyone to cover their night shifts and had to close at 6 p.m. Tourism is fine. It's our, oh, I'm under a minute, all right. I'm gonna go right to the closing. Dun, da, da. In closing, I would like to remind folks that Provincetown is many things for many people. A drunken holiday, a premier art colony, a historic fishing village, a night sky full of stars. But for me, the Provincetown I see and try to create every day is one where people are more important than profits. that community supersedes capitalism, a town where the people with the least are raised up rather than ground down. If we all love Provincetown, and I truly hope that we all do, then we must protect the town by protecting the year-round rental housing stock. If you truly love a town, you have to start by loving and helping all the people in it. Thank you.
We're gonna do one more short-term rental and then we'll have questions on all of them.
Yes, Michael and I have been talking a lot, so we're happy to field questions together as soon as I introduce Article 20. My name is Paul Benson. Thank you all very much. I'm the lead petitioner for Article 20. I would say that Articles 18, 19, and 20 share some common premises about what has been happening in town and about what's going to be happening in town. Then they have some slight differences on how to execute on those ideas. So I'm going to talk about those premises for a bit. As I think everybody knows, we have an absolute crisis in year-round rental housing. We actually also have a crisis in seasonal worker housing, although that's harder to measure. The year-round rentals, we know. The census shows 849 year-round rental units in Provincetown in the year 2000 and 334 in 2019. 60% of our rental housing has vanished in 20 years. And that is the housing crisis reduced to just one number. That includes all the rentals we have built. Moushope, Province Landing, Stable Path, Henshey Lane, 83 Shankpainter, all are affordable inventory. Even with those built, which took years, we have had a complete collapse in rental inventory. We have construction projects in the pipeline now, but you can make a spreadsheet and we are losing units faster than we are building them. We have a consensus in this town around building units, and that is great. But I think it is evident, if you look at the numbers, that we cannot only build units. It's like pouring water into a tub on the left, but the tub is draining on the right. We're never going to fill the tub if we refuse to look at what is happening on the right, at how units are draining away from the rental housing market. Not every terminated rental in this town winds up as a short-term rental, but if we are being honest with ourselves, many, many do. The outsized returns of short-term rentals are in the Camoin report from 2019. We allocated our short-term rental tax money in this room to housing for a very good reason. The pipeline from long-term housing to short-term rentals is very, very real. You can ask hundreds of people in town who can point to all the places they used to live. There is just no cost to evicting a longtime tenant, fixing the place up into a short-term rental, and making incredible returns. It is still happening all around us, constantly, including last year and this year. State law has given us tools we can use to manage short-term rental growth. Since 2018, towns have been allowed to regulate the number of licenses or permits issued to short-term rental operators. That's Chapter 337 of the Acts of 2018, Section 8-14 for the legal eagles in the room. These tools need to be used. This is a conversation the town needs to be having. We have 1,300 to 1,500 short-term rentals. We have less than 400 long-term rentals. And anyone who works in tourism will tell you we have an abundance of tourists and no people to serve them. Our healthcare providers, our nonprofits, our mental health agencies are staggering under the inability to get their recruited hires to actually move here. And every year they lose key people. We heard from one, an OCHS physician assistant, who was crying at our last housing workshop because she could not bear the thought of having to leave her post and leave this town. So, Article 20. It is carefully written to grandfather in all existing short-term rentals. Everyone who has a rental history, everyone who has paid taxes to the state gets a license that they can keep and transfer to the next buyer of their property. It is actually written specifically to protect property owners who made decisions based on short-term rental revenue. We do need those short-term rentals. They do support our tourist economy. I do know that, And this article was crafted very specifically to keep short-term rental activity in place where it already exists. It is also crafted to protect the town's rental inventory. Once the permits have been allocated to existing rentals, to open a new short-term rental will require closing another one. There would be a cost. This is how liquor licenses work in San Francisco. This is a change, I know. It's not the reality we have now, but limitless short-term rental rights is not a reality that many jurisdictions have found survivable. Portland, Maine has a very creative short-term rental cap. Palm Springs, California has one too. Barcelona, Paris, Portugal, tourist destinations have found that limitless short-term rental rights, which is our actual status quo, is simply not sustainable.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Paul. So again, Article 18, 19, and 20, citizen petitions. If there's questions directed towards either the petitioners, now's the opportunity to ask those questions.
Oh, so I have questions about all four. So I don't know if you want me to. So two of them are regards to who can hold in keeping, I think both of them say that you can only have one, basically one short-term rental. So my question is, what constitutes as, so if you're a married couple, legally married, it sounds like only, like, and you're both on the deed, then you can only have one. Like, are these legal questions or are these questions that should be ironed out before we?
So these are questions that, so they are citizen petitions, so the town isn't necessarily in a position to answer all of those questions. What the town can do is say what we're doing regarding regulations of short-term rentals, registration, the fact that we're undergoing economic analysis of the impact of short-term rentals on the economy. We want to make sure that any proposed petitions, bylaws will actually address the problem before us and not cause any unintended consequences. So because these are citizen petitions, I would encourage the petitioners to do their best to educate the public between now and April 3rd. But we will have a few minutes if you guys want to come up and answer specific questions.
It is my understanding that if you're filing jointly, then it's one, but I can follow up and get back to you on that.
Okay, so you're saying it's possible. Oh, right. So there would be one for those two people.
Right.
Right. And then for, so similarly, I think like to an LLC, so I think yours more specifically maybe than Paul's,
Yep.
it limits it to, an LLC works, but of course an LLC can have multiple owners. So I think you're suggesting that, not suggesting, you're saying that if, that only, you can only be on one LLC.
Correct.
Right, okay. And then
that's only moving forward. If you are currently on a number of different LLCs, you could keep that. It's just moving forward that would be restricted.
is that, you're saying it's is that the same thing where you say grandfather? But
Correct.
that, is that in here?
Yes.
So it's not going to be an amendment, it's actually in here.
I'm sorry?
It's actually in the article, it's not in
It's
the.
in Article 18, yes.
Okay. About that, what if there are more than 1,500 certificates? What if there's more than 1,283? And also the date that they're going to be, like, I think Paul says as of the day of town meeting, that'll be the deadline of when you can have a short-term rental, I don't know what, before. And then yours, I think, is June 1st.
Yep.
But if they, and you're using numbers that I think are still out there, you know, there was, you quoted the study, but I don't know. So what I'm getting at is which number is the right number if they're both talking about the same thing? And what about people between like today or March? I thought, you know, March 1st, I thought was maybe the original date that you had on there, somebody had. So whatever, so now it's April 3rd. What happens to those people in the interim? They would still obviously be, I mean, shouldn't everybody just go out and get a short-term rental now?
So I can speak for the 1,500 number. That was ascertained by Granicus, spoke with Dan about it. And the number is between 1,450 and 1,500. So I chose the 1,500 number to give that buffer in case there's people in transition that they would have time to get those short-term rental certificates. It also gives folks, I mean, I think, I don't know, Dan, maybe you want to chime in, but we have like 700 short-term rental certificates out. But Granicus, this agency who does, you know, some sort of compliance, says we have like 1,450 of them total. like people that are doing Airbnb. So that gives people time to register and get their certificate before the cap starts.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question on this. This reminds me of when the National Seashore had the permits to go in on the beach. Everybody remembers you could get a permit. Well, maybe you folks don't remember, but when they put a cap on it, it was a line out Race Road all the way out to the highway, and everybody went nuts. Once you tell somebody that they can't have something or you're going to put a limit on it, you're going to just get people that are going to do this. I know that from the fishing industry. We ran into that with the permits and all the whatever. And to be the way I'm looking at it, I'd like to see it capped low.
That's right.
I'd like to see it capped low. I actually like what Paul has up over there. I wouldn't even mind seeing it a little bit lower than that. You know, but no, hear me out on this thing. You know, I know it sounds ridiculous. Yes, we do need short-term rentals. I'm not saying we don't. Look, I'm in the fishing industry. Somebody's got to eat my crap, right? You know, I get it. But the thing is, what I've seen in my neighborhood on my street, we go from 1 to 75. I think there's 4 year-round residents that live on my street. That includes the oil company.
Yep.
You know, it's like, you know, I got a starter castle on this side and a starter castle on this side here, and, you know, the extra apartments and this and that, whatever the hell is going on. I have no idea. If you have registered 750 or 800 legitimate things, stop it right there. Because they went through the trouble to have the inspections done, they licensed it, they're paying taxes to the town. The rest of them, hey, tough. I mean, I'm sorry, that's the way it is. So what they've proved now is that number that you have up there, you have what, 300 more illegal places that haven't been paying taxes to this town that we're due, or I'm due because it's my town? Come on. I mean, there's something radically wrong going on. I like the idea of capping the doggone thing, saying too bad. And the sad thing is, both your articles are fantastic. I wish this came out 10 years ago. You know, but woulda, coulda, shoulda. You know, it's just the way it is. I'm sorry, but you know, I you know, and you're right too. The other thing that we're going to run into, no matter what, is the lack of workers. It's got to start somewhere. So you look, if it starts now, that'd be fantastic. It'd be a wonderful thing. But it's just going to get progressively worse and worse and worse until we do something about it now.
We do have a couple of questions online. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't get your name there, but I did want to thank you, Alex. I do think it also would have been better if it had been done 10 years ago, but we're not there anymore. The March 1st matter, is it John Keith? Is that who asked that? Yeah. Was trying to establish the grandfather clause, what would be grandfathered in. I turned in the petition on March 1st, so I did not actually want to see a gold rush of people getting 1-week rentals in April. So that's why March 1st is in there, to try to say any plausible rental history that you can convince the Board of Health is valid. Even if you didn't pay taxes and you don't appear on the state taxpayer list, the Board of Health would be able to give you a permit up to that cap based on their existing rental activity up to March 1st. That's what that date was doing in that number.
And one other thing, the concern that you brought up about people just running out and getting it because they want something, you know, we anticipated that. And so if you do get a rental certificate and you don't use it within the year, then it's taken back by the town.
Michael, you just answered my question. Thank you.
My question is actually for town staff. You guys mentioned Marriott International and the other corporation. I know that corporations have bought guest houses, but does the assessor know how many corporations have bought private homes in town? As far as corporations that bought them for the intent of just weekly rentals versus someone buying it, obviously in the name of an LLC, which happens all the time.
We probably have some data. I don't know the data off the top of my head, but we can probably get some more specific data.
That'd be great to know for town meeting. Like if it's, you know, if we're under some deluge of people coming in to buy private homes, or if it's like 1 or 2, be great. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons we're doing the study is to try to identify, the current supply of year-round rentals, have they been impacted? Is it short-term rentals? Is it the fact that we've grown our population year-round by 25%, which has no doubt had an impact on supply? There will be an enforcement question. The Attorney General has to approve any bylaw passed by town meeting, which could take between 90 days and upwards of 6 months. And so there will be a legal question as to how we address people getting short-term rental certificates, both between now and town meeting, but also between town meeting and the time the AG would approve anything if it does advance through town meeting.
Gordon, I did just want to mention, I asked for the short-term rental taxpayer list from town staff last year. I did go through it when the community impact fee was being discussed, because it only applies when you own 2 or more short-term rentals. So we did do some research on how many people that actually is. We did not find what you would call corporate owners yet. LexFest does have several short-term rentals in Truro, but not here. And there are very, very few who own more than 3. Like, I can count on one hand how many people owned more than 3 short-term rentals on the list. So that is why 3 was the cap per person in my article. Nobody owned more than 6, so a couple could theoretically own 6. They're grandfathered in anyway, but that's where that number came from.
Alex, do you know how the select board voted on these 3 articles?
So the select board voted there's 5 members. They made a motion to not recommend 4-0-1. And so 1 member abstained and 4 of the 5 select board members voted against recommending any of these articles. Both of our housing boards, the Community Housing Council, which focuses on affordable housing, voted 5-0 against these articles, and the year-round market rate rental housing trust, which focuses on middle income market rental housing, also voted against all 3 articles.
But Board of Health voted for 18.
Afternoon, Mike Capoli. First question is for Paul. Paul, why does your article grandfather in tax cheats and unsafe, uninspected units? Why did you make that distinction?
I love that question. Thank you. So grandfathering in people who were not on the taxpayer list obviously is something I did have to really grit my teeth over. Some people could plausibly say they had a situation in their life, maybe that Aunt Greta had to move in, so what used to be a short-term rental until 2018, Aunt Greta's been in it, but they should still get a license, so they didn't pay taxes starting in 2019. That's why I said if you can get votes from the Board of Health to their satisfaction that your short-term rental history is legitimate, you would be grandfathered in. But you have to convince 7 very astute people, and I do have a lot of faith in their judgment.
I understand that, in law school, they taught us there were exceptions to every rule, but we don't make rules because of the exceptions. And anyone who's been around town for any amount of time has undoubtedly visited, spent time, maybe even lived in some very unsafe, uninspected properties. Things that were sheds or used to house chickens and pigs have been turned into rental units, and they're rented out at relatively fair rates, and they don't have smoke detectors. They don't have CO2 detectors. They don't have the right number of exits, and there's no reason we should protect these people. In fact, this is a great opportunity to get out there and fix these problems. And we don't have to say, well, don't worry what you're doing for many years, because for many years what they were doing was unsafe, and they were really stealing from the taxpayers by not paying their fair share. That was my first point. Second question is to the town manager. Can this bill be amended, or this article be amended on the floor at town meeting, as far as the tax part and the number and the cap goes?
So any voter can make an amendment on town meeting floor. It's ultimately up to the moderator to decide whether or not the amendment is considered, quote, within its scope, whether it's more restrictive or less restrictive than what's printed in the warrant. Typically, the moderator consults with town council as to whether or not amendments are appropriate. I think, from the select board's perspective, someone asked about, select boards and the housing board's perception. We are doing an STR analysis, again, impact on tourism, year-round rental supply, real estate, and then also measuring these potential policies and what their impact would be, and if those proposed solutions would actually be solutions for this problem. And so we want to examine this. I think, this isn't being sponsored by town boards or town staff. I think we want to be a little bit more intentional and deliberate about any particular policy. I think we all recognize that, we're in a housing crisis and we have to do everything we can to increase year-round rental supply, but we want to make sure that any proposed bylaws would actually accomplish that goal.
Can you hear me? Does this work? Am I on?
Hi, my name's Lee Ash, and I spoke at the Board of Selectmen meeting and made a statement, and that's not my goal right now. It's your time to make your case for your articles. I've talked to Michael and some other people who have supported the petition, I guess I would say. I think that one of the reasons that there have not been recommendations is not that we don't support you and your ideas, because we'd all want to see things that work. However, there are lots of unintended consequences that many of us feel these articles have, as well as some real legal questions that people have pointed out. So my question to you is it possible that you would consider waiting until the fall to postponing the articles, meeting with the working groups that have been talked about, getting the, what's the name of the fund that's doing the study? Yeah, that UMass is doing, correct? Which they say is what, August or September? So that we can figure out a way to make this plausible, have it reduce the legalities that have to do with things. I'm not an attorney, by the way, but there's lots of things that have to do with contract law here. It's very difficult to actually put these articles into place for the summer, particularly with the contracts that are already withstanding and all the rest. But I'm sure that there's some way that this could all be worked out. So my question to each of you is it possible that you would consider working with a working group and postponing until the fall town meeting?
Thank you, Lee Ash. I really appreciate that. As I mentioned at the select board meeting that you were at on March 13th, I would personally be fully content to amend Article 20 downwards until it only works for 1 year. It puts the cap in place for 1 year, with the grandfather clause for who can get their permit for 1 year. It allows town staff to catch up to all those 700 missing certificates. It allows the select board to convene a working group. And I would be very happy to see that process in which the civic body could have more chances to look at that. I can let you know that I did ask town council to review that amendment, and town staff told me that would not be possible. So we won't know what town council thinks until we hit the floor on April 3rd. And I am trying to meet with the town moderator to seek her opinion, but she's currently in France. So as of now, I do not know if that amendment, which I would be perfectly content to offer, will be available on town meeting floor. I would like to know in advance. I would love to have the opinion of town council in advance and the town moderator's opinion, but I cannot promise you that I will be able to get that. But thank you for asking, and I agree. I think the town having a year to look at this with a cap in place to prevent further evictions and a gold rush to open brand new short-term rentals would be good policy.
Can I just follow up on that really quickly? So you don't have any intention of withdrawing the article and working together with people on it? You just want to amend it?
I believe amending it to last only 1 year and then expire creates the space for the town to come up with another plan of its own. But I don't want to see no cap in place so the wheels of eviction continue turning all the way through until next April. That concerns me, and I would rather advance, and town may vote it down, I don't know, a 1-year cap that allows us to debate, discuss, establish, and plan together, but with some controls in place. That's my desire.
All right, we've got a couple of questions from folks online that I want to go to.
I would only be willing to support that if the select board unanimously agreed to support the 1-year moratorium cap. Without that, I would not go forward.
All right, I'm going to go to some questions online. So someone asked, I'm currently renting long-term, trying to help the town, but what if I need to switch to a shorter period at times? I guess I'm screwed for doing the right thing if I suddenly need a short-term certificate and can't get one.
That is why the lottery is in place, that if people need it, they can apply for the lottery. It isn't as guaranteed as what happens now, but that's what the situation is. And thank you, whoever that is, for currently renting to a long-term person. That's fantastic.
Another one from online. If all STR articles are passed, so all 3, how will conflicts between them be resolved? For example, one article limits STR certificates to 1 per person and does not allow certificates to transfer with the properties. Another one allows 3 certificates per person and allows certificates to transfer with the properties. So the question is, if all 3 pass, how would conflicts be resolved?
Well, I think if we have a room that's passing all 3 of these on April 3rd, that's quite a red letter day. If there are conflicts in the bylaws, I imagine we could do a variety of things to address those conflicts. The Attorney General will have her say, and the Board of Health will probably have some ideas about what to do. And we may get to have another party in this room where we vote on a consolidated and cleaned up measure. Inclusionary has been changed a series of times. ADU has been changed a series of times. If town meeting really wants to approve all 3, I'll be having a lot of champagne and then figuring it out after that.
All right, and then I think the last one is, if you can keep your short-term rental certificates under Article 19 and 20, what is the renewal process and renewal period? I think it would be a year, right? Would it be a year?
Yeah, you would just renew every year. The way town recently changed the process for short-term rentals. It used to be a 3-year permit for $100. Now it's a $750 permit for every year. So that process doesn't actually change. Technically, the entire legal regime of the certificate doesn't change. We're just limiting the number of them.
We're just going to do one more question on this, Jonathan, and then we're going to move
just curious, would you consider an incentive where if someone says, I will rent year round, and then in exchange for creating a year-round rental, not like seasonal, but year-round, because there's a distinction between short-term and seasonal and year-round. I mean, I have 4 short-terms and 3 seasonals. Would you consider an incentive where you would say if you do that, you would offer I mean, is that something you might be an idea to encourage short-term, to encourage year-round rentals?
There are models that are currently being applied in the United States where towns will pay a apartment owner, say, what I'm thinking about, what I read was $20,000 if you would rent year-round, so that you get paid $20,000 a year from the town. So there are models that are like that out there.
Okay.
I'll just add, there are lots of creative policy ideas. One of them similar is in Tahoe, new multi-unit construction, 50% of the units get a short-term permit, which are capped in Tahoe, and then 50% do not. So as an incentive to new builders, you get 2 short-term rentals and then 2 that are deed restricted year-round. So that's an encouragement to have construction continue.
All right, we're going to try to move quickly. through. We do have a couple of more citizen petitions if the petitioners are here. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Michael. Article 21 is a petitioner here for non-binding. It's a non-binding resolution asking the town to conduct low noise fireworks.
Thank you, everyone. I am Shira Kavan. I reside at 1 Railroad Avenue in Provincetown, and this is my petition. The petitioned article is a non-binding resolution for low noise fireworks to see if the town will support a non-binding resolution directing the select board to immediately substitute low noise fireworks for conventional fireworks in any town-sponsored celebrations. The use of low noise fireworks is gaining in popularity as it has become more apparent in recent years that those in the population that cannot tolerate the noise of traditional fireworks, including children and adults with autism or sensory processing disorders, veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, crime victims, those with anxiety disorders, and household pets. The noise and reverberations from explosive fireworks can even affect wild animal life. Provincetown is known for its acknowledgement of diversity in communities. It is a town that includes veterans and citizens of all ages and abilities, and is touted as one of the nation's best and most welcoming resorts for those with pets. In a recent building survey sent to homeowners, the town inquired as to the number of pets in the respondents' home. Pets accompany their humans who work in town hall, are a welcome sight on our streets, and are owned and loved by many year-round residents. Wild animals abound in our waters and conservation lands to our delight. The joy of fireworks is primarily a visual pleasure, and while their essence on the 4th of July might be to commemorate battles for independence, their visual beauty should not be overshadowed or completely unavailable to some because of an auditory nod to bombs bursting in air. Beginning a new year with the sounds of explosions when hopes for peace abound seems downright antithetical. The natural beauty and awe we experience with shooting stars, eclipses, and coastal sunsets all come without deafening explosions. Research has shown that all animal life is affected by the noise produced by explosives. While the town meeting body might struggle most with house pets, the mammals, fish, and birds who make homes in our bay also suffer when we create a hostile environment, be it pollution from foreign substances in the water or the extreme noise pollution we take for granted as part of this type of entertainment. In recent years, the town meeting body has acted against the pollution created by plastic bags, bottles, and straws, and has voted to preserve lands for conservation. It is time we acted as a town meeting body and as a town to eliminate the noise pollution of explosive fireworks. The actions we should direct the town to take by our vote are simple. Demand from our current holiday fireworks contractor to employ low noise fireworks in the shows purchased on our behalf with the tax dollars we vote to appropriate for those shows at town meeting. If our current contractor is unable to provide this alternative, the contract should be put out to bid to find a contractor who will meet our needs. Provincetown has been a leader and early adopter of policies that make our footprint lighter on our beloved town and its natural resources. Let's consider our neighbors, our pets, the wildlife that surrounds us, worthy of this kind of forward-thinking change.
Hi.
Hi.
Two questions. The first is the second part where you just said the town board or someone will be voting on whether or not to have the celebrations?
No, this is not to not have fireworks. This is to employ low noise
Okay, but then
fireworks.
you're saying that the town has to find someone who can do that. But that was my second question. Is there a specific, like I can understand what low noise is to me, but that's not necessarily what they consider low noise.
Okay,
Yeah, how is that? Like low noise is a description, not a name.
Correct. But low noise fireworks are employed already in some towns around the country, in Canada, in the UK, and in Europe. They are conventional fireworks, when they are set off, are exposing the hearing of people and animals to 150 decibels of noise. Low noise fireworks are generally at 70 decibels. And it is, as I understand it, when I was crafting the proposal, the non-binding resolution, the select board instructs the DPW in how to, in its contracting of fireworks that we use at the 2 celebrations that are town sponsored.
Done enough talking tonight, haven't I? Back when I was lobstering here in town, we always knew just around after the blessing of the fleet, we used to take our gear and get it off the breakwater, around the breakwater, and move it out, because I want to tell you something. Right after we had the 4th of July fireworks, we knew for 2 weeks you didn't catch a lobster. Hello?
Okay.
Anybody who's owned a dog here, and I had a dog, you know where she used to go? Bathtub. Used to hide in there, and this was a brave border collie that would tear anybody apart, and she was in there shivering. But I've never heard of low impact firework before.
Low noise.
I've never heard of it, but you know, there's a lot of things I haven't heard of. But the thing is, the other thing I've seen as a commercial fisherman too, on the boats afterwards, we used to get the residue on the boats, the gunpowder and whatever, and being a veteran, I know all about that crap. But I'm just saying to you, I've seen it, and you know, there is something out there, but without getting too nuts about this thing. I just never heard of low impact fireworks before, but I suppose that anything's possible. You know, it'd be nice to watch the low impact fireworks with no utensils to eat your food. This is going to be good. I don't know.
Well,
you know, no, and I mean it in a good way, because, and I do have to say something.
Yes.
As a shell fisherman, we are studying right now, we are studying the microplastics that's not here yet in our harbor, but that has been in the shellfish down south, and they have been studying it at Virginia Institute of Marine Science. If you look it up, you'll find those big studies that are on the thing. Matter of fact, the bracelet that I have on here is made from recycled plastics that they were doing for a while and all that kind of stuff. But for every action we have, there is a reaction out there, as long as we use common sense more than anything else. I'd appreciate it.
I would appreciate it's great to hear your input. And I think that hearing from someone who is in the seafood industry to talk about what those impacts are is very important. So if you can repeat it in town meeting, I'm right there with you.
You never know. They probably say move the question every time they see me. It's a smart thing to do. But in a way, even our harbor master too, down on the pier down there, when those things shoot off, that goes on the decks of the draggers. It goes on the decks of where we put seafood going across. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on there. You don't see it. Well, sometimes you do if you run your hand across the thing, but I'm just saying to you, there's a lot more that meets the eye. So,
thank you. Final.
I'm fully in support of this article.
Thank you.
But you, previous speaker, brought up the debris. I wondered if you had any information, if there are any quantitative studies about the amount of debris that a single firework or a crescendo of fireworks produces.
The amount of debris.
Pollutions.
Yeah. This article or this proposed non-binding resolution does not deal specifically with that, but because there would be, I imagine, I have to do some further research so that I have those numbers at the night of town meeting. There is either less gunpowder used to create the less noisy firework, Or there are other methods used. For example, compressed air is used in certain ways to fire off the fireworks. So there may be even more good effects to redound from going with low noise fireworks beyond just the noise effect.
Thank you. Article 22.
Hi, I'm Gordon Siegel. I'm the proponent of Article 22, which, unbeknownst to me, that Article 2021 was going to appear this year, is to ask for the firework to just be held on the 4th of July and just be limited to 30 minutes in duration. I'm not going to read my speech. Everything that the previous speaker said holds true about fireworks. Veterans, with people with PTSD, all our pets, the dogs, cats, any other animals, and especially the wild animals, including those in the bay that are affected by fireworks. As far as global warming, you know, we have the Coastal Resilience Committee going on right now. Fireworks release carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen into the air when they go off. So my feeling was, I've been here 1996. Fireworks started on New Year's, I believe, around 2016. It was cloudy last year. They didn't really go off. They went off, but it was basically a red cloud and a blue cloud and that sort of stuff. And I just feel like for New Year's, we could come up with something that's a little more creative and a little more environmentally and people concerned for what we're doing. And that's really why I brought it. I didn't want to touch the 4th of July because as long as I've been here, that's the third rail and you don't mess with the 4th of July fireworks. So anyway. It's during the 4th of July holiday. My article's written, so anytime during that 4th of July holiday. It could be the 3rd, it could be the 4th, it could be the 5th, it could be the 6th. Correct. Correct. Correct, because they'd have to go for a permit.
Part of a memorial for a local woman that passed a couple of years ago. And the town doesn't permit that. The state fire marshal permits that in areas of the water that are not governed by the town. Article 23, I think the last citizen petition.
Well, Johnson, I'm going to withdraw Article 23. I mean, the historic committee they voted to take no action. But I just want to say my intent is not to sabotage affordable housing. At 40A Nelson Avenue is an example of 6 units with a narrow driveway back to those units. And what I was hoping to see was something that integrated with the neighborhood and was less impactful. We have a development on the other side of the tennis club, which is 12 units, 24 bedrooms, 13 parking spaces. The units are 900,000 up, so those people are certainly going to have more than one car. The tennis club is there. They park a lot of cars on the street, which is fine, but we don't really know the impact of the one that's at 286A. And then the building that I was hoping to save is over 100 years old, probably even over 150 years old. The tenant has been in there 40 years, worked in the restaurant business for 20 years. So, and it's sort of old Provincetown, and I just keep hating to see it erased in various places and various examples. And in fact, I do have somewhat of an answer for the 80% of people who want studio apartments, because I've done it and it works. And between my place at 292 and Howland Street, I counted 10 structures that could be converted into single person occupancy units, which I've done with a garage I have, and they're all over town. So there are ways in which Jerome Smith, they're going to spend $600,000 a unit. For less than 150,000, probably less than 100,000, you could pay the property owner who had a garage, convert it. They could collect the rent, the town could regulate it, they would manage it, and you'd end up with units all over town. But that's another story. I just wanted to bring that up because I'd like to publicize it. The map up there is, that's just the example of 40A Nelson Avenue, what they did there. So it is possible. I don't know if it's, and I'm not even trying to stop them from demolishing the building. I'm just trying to see if they would consider it, look into it a little closer and see. If it doesn't work out that way, then that's the way it goes. But I've lived in the neighborhood for 50 years. I'm a NIMBY, although I consider Provincetown my backyard, and the Amazon and the Ukraine and a few other places. But so I just know that I've known that person for 40 years. Don't have brunch with her, don't hang out with her, but she's been there, sort of a fixture, and the house has been a fixture. So that was my intent. It wasn't to try to sabotage or to try to make an end run around any of this. And the only reason why I extended it one property line is because it's the property, the district ends right there at the tennis club. I thought, well, nobody will complain, but it was misinterpreted, and I apologize for that. I didn't mean for that to happen, but it's not going to be, it's an illegal, the process isn't right, so it isn't going to happen.
Hi, it's Paul Benson. Well, one of my colleagues was going to write a story about Article 23, and I think probably she won't now.
Oh, gee, that's too bad, because she talked to me this morning. I wouldn't mind if she did. I mean,
maybe it's not my decision. We'll see.
Yeah.
But while we're all here, I was curious. The plans for 288A Bradford do say a unit count on the website, but I don't know much about that, and I just was curious, since we're all here, if you could tell us anything about what may or may not be possible at that property.
Well, first, thank you, Jonathan, and for your willingness to work together and explore some of your ideas. Last year, town meeting approved the money to buy 288A Bradford Street, and we made a commitment to the body that we'd work with the two tenants that have lived there for quite some time. We believe that we can get upwards of 15 units at the site. It's a joint open space housing project, so the back would be preserved for open space. We wouldn't be using 100% of the developable space. And I know we worked in partnership with Dennis Minsky, the Open Space Commission, walked the site and brought it to town meeting as a joint housing project and open space project. We have, at the current moment, are still working with the tenants. RFP is not imminent, and we'll continue to work with the tenants and go from there. And I think to Jonathan's point, if we do move forward with a request for proposals, different developers, proponents can put together plans, and the town won't design a plan that we'll put a unit number, our goals that we want to incentivize as many units as possible, things like that. Probably mentioned the number of 15, but we don't put sort of design, and so we could put the current site. So it's not out of the question that a proponent wouldn't propose building 15 units around something on the site, but obviously it is possible that that could also be the case where it is a clean site and it's all new construction. So we don't have a final, obviously, design. We haven't even reached that phase of the project.
There's a 45 number when you click on 288 on that.
Christine told me this morning in her email to me, and I let her know that it was a mistake and it was 15. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so there's not many slides left, and I appreciate those of you that have stuck with us for the remainder of the warrant. Article 24, now that we're done with citizen petitions, this is an easement for electrical service on town property here at Town Hall. It would install an additional conduit, additional transformer, have more power reliability in the peak season, in season, to prevent outages here in the center of the commercial district. Article 25 is an article sponsored by the License Board. Chapter 138, Section 17 limits the number of off-premise licenses based on population. We have businesses that are forced to maintain both a year-round wine and malt license as well as a seasonal all-alcohol license in order to maintain their business. By raising this cap, we would be supporting existing businesses who sell off-premise alcohol. And so this would address existing businesses that need to get 2 licenses and allow them to just get 1 license. There is a Article 26 sponsored by the Select Board. It amends the town charter to include a requirement that prohibits elected officials from declaring a homestead in any other community but Provincetown. John?
What is a homestead?
It's a homestead declaration that you typically sign as to your primary residence.
Do you have to be a resident to get the homestead? So is the idea here that you have to live here to run for office?
Yes.
What if you're a renter?
You don't need to have a homestead to run for office.
So then this would not apply to them?
It wouldn't. It would be if you are running for office, but your primary residence and homestead is in Boston or New York.
Okay.
Would qualify. So this essentially strengthens the already existing residency requirement that's in the charter. And you have to be a registered voter. Article 27, this cleans up inconsistencies in the bylaw regarding public ways. The Department of Public Works oversees, so if you're ever walking down a sidewalk or a public way and a private property's bushes encroach on the walkway, for example, you have to walk around. ADA issues, just issues in general. This strengthens the town's ability to enforce people that aren't chopping back their hedges, bushes, and things like that. We presented this to the Select Board last year, and we had some conflicting bylaws, so we work with Town Council to consolidate them. Article 28, a zoning bylaw. This is a small tweak in the inclusionary zoning bylaw. This would, so right now in its current form, we think there's an internal inconsistency that could delay the potential sale of an affordable unit to a buyer. Housing deed restrictions are recorded at the closing of sale, and in order to close on a loan, there has to be a certificate of occupancy in place. The bylaw requires the deed restriction to be recorded before any certificate of occupancy could be issued, and so it does create a small delay and a chicken and egg problem. This amendment would fix that and protects the town and ensures that affordable component of any development will be completed in a timely manner. So again, this is more a housekeeping clerical to strengthen the existing bylaw and prevent any delays moving new owners into the affordable unit. Article 29 is sponsored, I believe, by the Planning Board. It strengthens Section 2320 to better protect dunes during construction in the high elevation protection district, including the consequential excavation and removal of existing vegetation that naturally anchors the dunes. So this again is a zoning bylaw amendment in regards to the high elevation protection district. Yep. Tim, do you want to? Tim, do you want to provide a little bit of, or Thaddeus, do you want to do it?
Hi, Dennis. So this adds a little more specificity with the construction protocols in the high elevation protection district. So for that, it's means and methods such as erosion control barriers and specifying the time in which a dune has to be stabilized. So right now it doesn't talk about temporary stabilization versus long-term stabilization, and this provides more specific timeframes, 3 months for temporary, 6 months for long-term stabilization of the dune.
Thank you, Thaddeus. And then the last and final section of the warrant is the consent agenda, a lot of recurring items in there. And typically they're not debated, although any voter can go up and make a motion to pull something from the consent agenda if they'd like to ask questions or debate a section of the consent agenda in particular. And that's Article 30 through 37. So you can see the list of articles under consent. There is one housing related article, Article 36, is a 0.5% real estate transfer fee, a home rule petition that would add that transfer fee, and that money would go into our housing funds to support the development of community housing in the community. All right, well, I would add that this meeting has been recorded. It will be available online if you'd like to share, rewatch, send to other voters and residents in town. It will also be rebroadcast on PTV. For those that weren't able to attend or listening, people here that weren't able to get all of their questions answered, feel free to utilize town staff. Please reach out to us between now and town meeting. We try to answer as many questions as possible and get as much information out to the community before town meeting as possible, and making sure voters are as educated as they can be going into the town meeting. So with that, we look forward to seeing everyone on Monday, April 3rd at 6 o'clock here in Town Hall, and appreciate everyone being here and appreciate town staff for being here as well and answering questions and being part of preparing for this event. So with that, have a great evening and see you on April 3rd.